Hello and welcome to Tony and Leona Live. I'm Leona.
And I'm Tony.
Merry almost Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. You got your presents wrapped? You have your stockings hung by the chimney with care?
Today we're going to go over our predictions for 2022. When I say our predictions, I really mean Tony's. In our marriage, he is the one who likes to predict things and always have. As long as
Not
I've known you.
always. I just sometimes see
Yes.
things in the near future.
And he's pretty accurate, I have to say. I can think of only one time when you've been wrong.
I've been wrong more than just one time,
Okay.
but probably the most recent time was I predicted that President Trump was going to win re-election in 2020 in a landslide.
Yep.
Of course, this was before the pandemic. It was before anybody knew about the virus, and my prediction actually changed after that. If you remember,
This is true. I do remember.
the pandemic hit, and I was listening to the radio, and real late at night, and this guy who I listened to, I won't tell you his name, but he's former CIA, and he's also worked with various intelligence agencies. But it was right when the COVID-19 was out. Everyone was scrambling; they didn't know what it was, and he kind of laid out everything on this late night radio show.
And thus far, has he been right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much spot on. But one of the things that he talked about was the trajectory of the virus. And he said that in November of 2020, which this was in March, he's saying that that's when it was going to peak in most areas of the United States, which is
To be fair, isn't rocket science. That goes along with flu season in much of the U.S. However, I will say many people did not seem to predict that.
But-
Like many people made decisions.
oh yeah, they thought it was going to peak in spring, like right
Right,
away. Everyone was
right.
like, look at Italy,
Yeah.
and that Italy's coming to Minnesota, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, that's not
So I'd say
necessarily.
it's common sense, and yet it wasn't followed by most people.
So, anyways, when he was going over all of this, that's when he talked about the timeline, and he was like, "This is a real virus." This is when people thought it might have been a hoax, or they
Oh,
didn't know
sure.
what was going on. He's like, "This is real." He's like, "A lot of people are going to die," and he's like, "The first wave is going to peak in November of 2020," and it's kind of putting two
That was the
together. I was
election.
like, "Well, what's it in 2020?" He didn't make this inference,
Right.
But you remember I posted something when I used to have a
Yes.
Facebook account.
I remember in March he posted something about the presidential election, and just shows how differently Tony's and my brains are wired. I was like, what? Like, how are you even thinking about the election in November, right now in March, when we have this virus and we're being put out of work and all this craziness? And
Well, I put out a post and basically suggested the idea that we should think about delaying the election until March of 2021.
yes, and
Just
most
because of all the craziness that was going to be occurring at that time. I was like, how could we have a legitimate
Secure.
secure election with people in the hospital, with cases spiking, and
And a couple people responded and were like, oh, you're just saying this because you want Trump in office longer. But interestingly, had this been done, if the presidential election in 2020 had been put off, Pelosi actually would have been in.
yeah, which I would have been fine with. Yeah,
right,
the way
the-
that would have to have worked is President Trump would have had to have relinquished his powers because they expire, I think, January 6th or 3rd or
Something,
whatever,
yeah.
6th it was.
I think so.
And the way the chain of presidency goes, it would have ended up being Nancy Pelosi, I believe, who would have
yeah.
been president for 3 months.
But then other people's responses was, this is insane. Like, just go to mail-in ballots.
A lot of people right
Yeah,
away were like,
yeah.
no, let's just do mail-in ballots. And they were mostly my progressive friends who were suggesting this. And
And thus began the whole conversation of, is that the purpose of mail-in ballots? Is a mail-in ballot the same as an absentee ballot? A lot of people seem to think they are, but they're certainly not. It's very different for a person to request an absentee ballot for a specific reason than to en masse.
well, it's
send out.
just not that secure,
Mail-in
and
ballots, right.
it's amazing because I draw the analogy of, okay, if mail-in is so secure, then mail out my vaccine passport
to everybody.
to everybody. Mail it out to me, send it out blank.
Yep.
I'll talk to my doctor. I'll get my shot. I'll fill it out myself after that, or my doctor can fill
We'll
it
have,
out.
yeah, I think that
And,
whoever gives it to.
And why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
Or similarly, it's the same thing with IDs,
Yeah.
right? Voter ID, that same issue comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, voter IDs, they're racist, right? Except why aren't vaccine passports racist?
Yeah.
It's even more racist potentially because a
Because
huge
it's
chunk of
private
the
information
well,
that
that and the huge
keeps
chunk
you
of the
out of society.
hesitancy is from people of color,
Yeah, yeah.
communities of color, and specifically poorer people.
Yeah,
and,
it's crazy.
And but that's not racist for some reason, even though you need a completely separate type of an ID system for that.
So why don't they send out blank vaccine passports to us and just let us have them filled out when we get our shot?
Because there wouldn't be integrity in the system.
Because I could fill it out myself potentially, or I could take other people's.
You could take other people's. You could make photocopies.
Yeah.
You could, you could collect a whole bunch. Where people aren't living there anymore. Collect them in the mail, take them, fill them out for other people, create a business from that. But it's why voting integrity is so important. But going back to the predictions. Yeah, going back to the predictions. We're trying not to rant and rave too much, but so 2022 is coming up. We made 10 predictions for the year. A couple of them are, I would say, maybe not that likely to come true, but they could. They could. I suspect they may, and then there's others I think that for sure are going to come true.
All right.
And but before that though, we were talking, so 2022, people are looking forward to a new year, putting 2021 behind us, putting 2020 behind us. 2 years now almost of this pandemic and all the craziness that's happened. So I got to ask you, Leona, and ask all of you too, 2020 or 2021, which was a worse year?
Okay.
For you, your opinion. And we'd like to know your guys' thoughts too. Which year was worse, 2020 or 2021?
I'm going to go with 2021.
Really? I would have thought 2020.
My reason, I'm sure there are exceptions to this. My reason is that more people died from the virus in 2021 than 2020, despite the fact that we have the doses. Another really confusing thing to me is that people don't seem to care as much. In 2020, people cared. 2021, more people are dying from it, and yet people don't care. It's not at all being broadcast the way it was. People aren't just sharing the number of lives lost to this virus and then, drawing conclusions based just on that number. I don't know why we did that in 2020 and not in 2021 when we're losing more people now. I also think that the vitriol between people when discussing so many difficult issues is worse. I also getting a little worn out from people being totally fine with segregating 5-year-olds, especially as it becomes just insanely obvious that these doses are not preventing transmission. So there's no even
and the science said
reason.
it never would.
We knew it, but I get it. Some of us were looking at the actual information from the manufacturers of the doses, and others were just listening to Fauci. I blame Fauci, not the people who believed Fauci, when he said this'll eradicate the virus. We knew it would not. But again, I don't blame the people who trusted him.
What about Biden?
Should be able to trust him.
He looked at people and he said, if you get this dose, you will not get COVID. He said it directly, right in the camera.
So, people who trusted the president or trusted the head of the NIH, we probably should be able to trust those people when they make statements like that. So again, I'm not blaming my fellow brothers and sisters who believed that, but I'm blaming the people in leadership who said that. I'm sure that they had that data. If I had that data and knew that it wasn't going to eradicate the virus, I'm sure they did. But anyways, what's so frustrating is that it is now absolutely clear, even if you're not reading the actual data from the manufacturers of the doses, it's clear it's not preventing transmission. So why are we segregating 5-year-olds?
It's not just 5-year-olds. They're arresting people for going to Applebee's,
Right.
for going to the Cheesecake Factory, Kroger. I know those guys are at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you can participate in group theft, take 30 of your friends and break into a Louis Vuitton and take tens of thousands of dollars. You won't even get charged. Or steal cars in Minneapolis.
Another thing. So yes, we're losing more lives to the virus. We're also losing more lives to homicide. Homicide was very high in 2020 compared to previous years, but it's even higher in 2021. At least for us, cost of living for just relatively normal people has increased. And I am not saying that's necessarily all the fault of Biden, but it's certainly worse. That's not good for anyone. So I'm going with 2021.
Wow. I think I'm going with 2020.
Okay.
Mainly because you were gone so much.
That was hard.
Working in the ICU in New York City and then Florida. Sorry, we got some sirens going in the background, but and then after Florida, California, being home with the kids full time. That it was great.
And homeschooling.
Loved it. And
You were
homeschooled,
home,
loved it.
You were homeschooling.
Extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Extremely difficult. And then the tensions just with people that we knew and just with masks and, you know, everybody, and I share your frustration, but in 2020, everyone was like, stay home. If you want to work, you're a killer. If you have a wedding, you're a killer. Your kid wants to go to high school graduation. No, like, you're killing
actually,
grandma. You protest, you can't
Yeah.
protest. But then they're like, these guys can protest
Yes.
and they can burn down buildings
So crazy.
because of this. It's like, what?
So crazy. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like everybody lost their ever living minds. And I think that psychosis trails with us. But what I was hopeful with 2021 is it seems like more people have woken up. I've
hope
seen
so.
more independent people or people I would have never ever thought even had conservative leanings whatsoever kind of come out of the closet.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're straight up conservatives by
No,
no
and
means, but
that's not the
standing up to
goal.
some of the stuff that's going on and
Yeah.
speaking out about it and
Absolutely.
risking their reputations,
Yep.
risking their contracts and everything to stand up for
Yeah.
truth.
The goal is, stand up for truth, stand up for humanity.
Nicki Minaj comes to mind.
Stand up
You know, somebody like
for-
her.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
when she came out, you know, when they gave
Joe
her a
Rogan.
hard time, Joe Rogan.
I always thought he was,
Just friends and family that we know that have gotten kind of involved
Mm-hmm.
and had spoken their minds about kids being able to go to school without masks. And but it was interesting.
I think go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's interesting that the mask thing is kind of reversed. I just saw something on, I think it was CNN, where the woman was saying that cloth masks are basically just decor on your face or
Yeah,
decorations.
it was
on
Dr.
face.
Leona when on CNN. She said, wear a mask, but she said, but not a cloth mask. They're essentially facial decor or facial ornamentation, which is pretty sickening given that people publicly, without any evidence to back it up, called other people out for like being killers if they didn't wear a piece of cloth over their faces. And I'm not even against masks. Like I wish I was. I've said this to you a lot. I've worn them so much at work. I can see some good, but anyways, on to predictions. We can talk about masks another day.
Predictions for 2022. Do the music. Dun, dun, dun. So we got about 10 predictions here. We're going to talk about each one, and that'll be the show.
Awesome.
So
Let's
we'd love
go.
to hear your comments if you think we have anything wrong.
Yep.
If you think we have anything right or something we forgot about. Also,
We've been called conspiracy theorists many times.
Well, there's
for saying the
speculation.
doses wouldn't prevent transmission and things like that. So
or
I'm
cloth
growing a
masks
harder
didn't
shell.
work and things like that. Yep. So, all right. So we're going to move to the very first prediction that we have. Are you ready for this, Leona?
Ready?
Okay.
I heard these once. I don't remember. Okay.
Okay. So this is the first one. These are in no particular order. So the prediction number one.
The Supreme Court will decide the OSHA vaccine or testing rule.
Okay. So this is a big one.
Yes, it is.
This is a big
Tony
one.
has predicted this on this show before, and you think Amy Coney Barrett will be the deciding.
Well, I think she'll
vote,
be the
correct?
deciding vote. Yeah, but I unfortunately don't know if this one's going to go our way or not, and I'll tell you why later in a different prediction that I have.
Okay.
But I think that the Supreme Court, they haven't taken up this case yet. This rule is set to go in effect on January 4th or 5th, and OSHA said that they're going to start initiating their penalties, which
Okay.
is essentially around $13,000
Okay.
per infraction. So if
That's
you have, and it's for
crazy.
businesses that are 100 employees or more throughout
So
the country.
per person, if I'm an employer who doesn't follow through with this, that's what I am
Yeah,
fined.
so the rule is called the
insane.
vaccine or testing rule, and it requires employers with 100 or more employees to monitor their employees and assumably report to OSHA through some type of a website portal the vaccination status. And if that person isn't, then that person has to get tested weekly, and those reports of those tests or the results of the test need to get reported
Okay.
on a weekly basis.
So this is a scientific aspect of this. I'll just say it quickly. I think we should all remember this. It is abundantly clear that being fully dosed and boosted does not prevent you from becoming infected or transmitting this virus. And so perhaps what bothers me the most about this ruling, that it says you have to be tested once a week if you're not dosed, But if you are, you don't have to be tested, which is, I really want to try to not be hyperbolic. I've said it before. It's insane to me that you would say someone who can transmit the virus has to be tested, while someone else who also can transmit the virus doesn't have to be tested.
Yeah.
I won't go on and
And
on.
we all know from Thanksgiving here in stores, like, I mean, we know so many people
It is
who
so
fully
clear.
dosed and a lot of them boosted and
Yeah.
they're infectious.
I mean, in
infectious
publicly, we see so many
with
people.
symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh.
I just wanted to hear the next prediction.
Oh.
So we don't talk on and on about this because I could for so long.
Okay. So let's see. Well, I'm not done. We're not done with this one
Oh,
yet. So
my bad.
January 4th is when it goes into effect, the OSHA rule. I think we're going to have a ruling sometime between January and February because OSHA made a statement when the Sixth Circuit or the Fifth Circuit, I can't remember which one it was, they reversed the stay. So it's half the country right now is under this rule. The other half of the country is not.
Crazy.
Because there are other lawsuits that are pending
Okay.
that are representing multiple states. So
Sure.
attorney generals, they filed them jointly. And so there's a conflict there in and of itself, which I think, and I'm not a legal scholar, but pretty much guarantees that the Supreme Court is going to
gonna-
step in.
okay.
Justice Kavanaugh, he's the one in charge of this particular appeal.
Interesting.
And he's received many
Requests.
requests sent to him even recently. So
Interesting.
expect this one to come very, very soon, and we'll see how they decide. But yeah, it's going to come down to Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, too,
Yeah.
the chief.
Yep.
And we'll talk about later why I think Amy Coney Barrett is probably going to side with the
Pro-mandate.
liberal judges and with Roberts. I think he's probably going to go the other way too, just because it's just us Roberts. It's not Justice Roberts. So, all right. So prediction number 2. Leona, can you do the drum roll, please? Is this one
Let's
it?
see.
What's it saying?
Omicron will fizzle out fast in early 2022 after more boosters, of course.
What do you think of that?
Well, in Africa, it's already fizzling out. The trend is already going down for cases. Encouragingly for all of us, of course, there may still be future deaths, but currently the death numbers have not spiked, even with the spike of cases as they have with previous variants. So that's good. So given how fast it's trending down in Africa, I think that will be the case. So when you say after more boosts, do you think that the boosters are going to help it go down?
You know, one amazing thing with the Omicron is I saw a nationwide map of the Omicron cases. It was on December 18th, so 4 days ago, and it literally had single digits in all the states. Texas maybe had double digits of
Yeah.
cases. So, and then all of a sudden, like 2 days later, they're like, "This is the dominant variant." So it's like,
Well, and
what's going on here?
I have yet, and I
So these are
realized-
part of the
sorry.
triggers that make me make these predictions. It's not that I can see into the future. It's more that I can see kind of the game that's
Yeah.
being played here. And that's why I put, we'll put that up on the screen again. After more boosters, of course.
So you're saying they're using it to get more people boosted?
No, they're using it to kind of give more credibility to the doses in a way, because what happens in the spring, and the same thing happened last spring too,
Yes.
right?
It's gonna go down anyways.
It spikes,
Yeah.
and we're gonna peak. It's
Yeah.
gonna peak in December and January. It's gonna be bad, which means
Yeah.
we're not trying to minimize this because
No,
people are
not at
dying
all.
from it and
Not
people
at
are
all.
getting sick.
Yeah.
But then it's gonna sharply go downwards as the spring moves forward, and subsequently,
say
they're
it's
going to
because
give
of
out
boosters.
a new booster that's going to be modified somehow by the Pfizer and Moderna. And as those cases are going down, they're going to be like, look at what the boost did.
We got rid of it.
They did it last year too.
Despite the fact
Remember,
that so many boosted, I think this whole thing started with primarily boosted people. I mean, we already talked about the case of the recently boosted physician who passed on Omicron to another recently boosted physician.
and they're
I
going
don't
to
know,
say
it's just crazy.
we're going to have everyone's going to be celebrating, and Fauci will take credit, and Biden will take credit. They're all going to take credit, and they're going to talk about freedom and the summer of freedom again. And it leads us to another prediction that I have coming up here. But let's see. Ready, Leona?
Dun dun dun.
What do we got here?
Third, Joe.
This is a big one. This is a big prediction.
No kidding. Joe Biden will no longer be president in 2022.
This is what I think.
All right.
This is what I think.
This is
And
a
I
bold prediction.
don't want anything bad to happen to the Biden administration, to Joe
Yeah.
Biden. This is not what this is about at all. So I just want to make that clear. But from a political strategy point of view, his ratings are they're bottomed out. Like, he is as low in terms of disapproval ratings as Trump was. And you all know how much.
Granted, Trump got a lot of votes in 2020.
But he's still not liked very well. So my point is that his disapproval rating is very, very low. And he also is, by measures of the polls that are out there, just as divisive as a president.
Yeah.
And Kamala's not very popular either.
Yeah.
So this all kind of brings down to 2022 and the objectives of 2022. So as is right now, if we had a fair and honest vote with integrity, there would be an absolute landslide crushing. Like, there'd be so many Democrats that are going to lose their seats in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Republicans would have super majorities in both. Like, it's literally that bad right now for them. So I think that President Biden's going to have to take an exit, stage left or stage right, or forward or backwards. And I even think they're going to have to bring in somebody else. But this is a bold prediction, I realize. It maybe could be completely off because there could be
You think
other tactics that
They'll
can
say,
take.
like, he's too ill.
I think it's going to come down to
So
health.
he has to, yeah.
I think it's going to come down to health. And I don't wish any ill
Yeah,
will
yeah.
on him at all. Like, I want his health to survive. I don't want him to pass on, obviously.
People could make that case now without
I think it's been
anything
building up
happening
to
to
that.
him.
It's
Yeah.
been building up to that. But the question is, and this is why I think this prediction's a little bit ambitious. It's probably the most ambitious of all the predictions there, is because who would take his place?
Yeah.
And what are the processes that it would take his place? And I thought probably the most logical person to take his place, and it goes back to our initial conversation, it would be Nancy Pelosi for 2 years or whatever it
Oh,
is
my.
till the next term. And maybe they bring in as her vice president. I don't know how that would work. I don't know how
Yeah.
a vice president is chosen. So if Nancy's in the succession, assuming Kamala and Biden are out, so Nancy, and then it would be, maybe she could choose her vice president, and if so, it'd be somebody like Michelle Obama. And they would groom
she could
her for
choose someone else.
2024. So they're going to need to
have
do
her run.
something. They're not going to want to cut their losses and hand Republicans a supermajority in 2022, because if they do, guess who's coming in 2024? Trump. I don't think Trump's going to be president ever again. I don't.
Yeah.
I think he could be, but you'll see why I don't think that it's going to happen. Everything that we've gone through the last couple of years, there's no way they're going to allow this to take place. Who do I mean by they? We can have a different show about that. So we'll see. Will Joe Biden make it through 2022?
We will see.
Okay, what's the next one that we got
Number
here?
4.
There we go.
Inflation will continue to run rampant and real estate values will continue to climb. I mean, gosh, I would
So
totally agree on the
inflation over the last year has been absolutely just jaw-dropping. You'll notice it with the price of gas, or going to the grocery store, or trying to buy bacon, or rent is extremely expensive. Real estate is tied to inflation, although there's other factors that are driving the price of real estate higher. But I think that inflation is going to continue to run rampant because they're going to continue to have to spend and print digital money and send it, more of it, into circulation, which is going to drive the cost of everything up. They're talking about raising the interest rates, but I suspect it may just be, there might be a few interest rate hikes. I don't think, unless they do substantial increases, it's not going to have a significant effect on inflation because so much money has been spent and printed over the last few years, especially, that there's not a whole lot that can be done except for raise interest rates substantially. And politically, that's just not going to be feasible for many different reasons. Real estate prices would go down, the stock market would crash, and people don't like that. That doesn't get you reelected when somebody's house drops 20, 30, 40%, or if somebody's portfolio drops the same amount. So That's my prediction, is inflation is going to continue to run rampant. So cryptocurrencies, they're going to experience a crash, but I think they're going to eventually, it's still going to be a great investment. Cryptocurrencies will over the next few years here. So what do you think
I
of that?
defer to you on all of these issues. You know far more. And on these, I think you have always been right thus far.
We'll see. I mean,
not
if
mean
I
you
was
always
the
will be,
Federal
but-
Reserve Chair, I would have raised rates a while ago, but I wouldn't be a popular one. I'd do the things that probably people wouldn't like, but
You wouldn't be
it's
the chair.
necessary. Next one.
Next one. Drum roll, please.
Uh-oh.
The 2022 midterm election will have massive mail-in voting again, and the Democrats will grow majorities.
Okay.
I hope you're wrong. For many reasons. I feel that the Democratic Party at one point had plenty of their platform that I would consider voting for. Currently, I feel like they've gone a little crazy. Mail-in voting we addressed a little bit earlier, but even I remember, again, when you first posted this in March 2020 about the election, I was kind of like, isn't mail-in voting the same as absentee voting? And not thinking about how vastly different it is to mail a ballot to everyone than it is to have an individual request a ballot just for them.
So the
And that's just
reason,
one issue of many.
the reason why I think this, and again, I don't want any of these to come true, but the last 2 years have been such HE double hockey sticks. There's been so much investment to have this uniform narrative that we have.
The uniform narrative of,
Just the last couple years.
okay,
Everything being the same, the 2020 election, everything related to the
Yeah.
2020 election, that uniform narrative of
Sure.
the things that were repeated on TV over and over and over
there
again.
is no widespread voter
And the
fraud.
things that were censored, that wouldn't change it. So that's why I think the investment from the power structures, they aren't going to let that go.
Let that go.
And so how are they going to do the mail-in voting again? Well, Omicron's going to disappear. We're going to have a spring that they're going to celebrate and a summer they're going to celebrate as a testimony as to why the doses are so great.
And then it'll
And
get
all the
worse again in
doctors
the
are going
fall.
to pat themselves on the back. Look what we did. See, this is why we did it. And it's almost gone now. And cases are down everywhere. And well,
That it'll come back.
it's a cyclical thing. You know, this is how they manipulate people because most people won't be able to recognize that. And I think that come fall, there's going to be a surge. There's going to be a new name of the variant. It's going to be scary. There'll be images and all of it, and it's going to hit people out of nowhere, and that's going to usher in mail-in voting.
Once again.
And that's how they did it because they never got HR1 passed,
Right.
which is the election reform act that the Senate tried to do. They didn't have enough votes to do it.
Right.
And so that they need to get that done.
Yeah.
If they want to have a one-party rule in America, that's how they have to do it, is they have to be able to legalize mail-in voting and drop boxes and expand ballot harvesting and not have voter ID requirements in the states, basically federalize the election system. That's the goal.
And in order for them to pass that, they need to grow their majorities, like you're saying, right? In order for them to pass that, they need to grow their majorities. So you're
We're
saying
on
they
a
will do that.
trajectory right now where if we had an honest and fair election with integrity, one person, one vote, the Republicans would sweep the House and sweep the Senate. It would be an absolute disaster for the Democrats. They'd lose like they've never lost before. It'd be worse than 2010. And so they need to prevent that at all costs. The way that you prevent it is through mail-in voting. So that's why that's going to be so key to their plan. And that's why I made that prediction. I hope I'm
It's
wrong.
depressing.
I know. We have to brace ourselves though. Like
Yes.
we got a tough year ahead of us. Like people were like, "Oh, Tony, Leona, things are going to go back to normal." It's like, no, they're not. They're not going back to normal anytime soon. We didn't go through the last 2 years like how we did for things to just go back to normal. I hate to say it, but that's just how it is. Next one.
All right. Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I hope so. We touched on this and we did another show. If you haven't listened to it, I would recommend it because this is a difficult topic. We talked about Catholic social teaching and how we can live that out today. I absolutely hope that Roe v. Wade will be overturned for many reasons. One, we need to have ethical laws in our country. I think the government should be protecting innocent people. Otherwise, I'm not sure there's much of a point in having a government. So in some ways, this is simple. In another way, it's not at all simple. Obviously, we're a republic, so this wouldn't like end abortion. This would give more power to the states. Again, I think that's a good thing. That's how we should be doing things. So that's another reason why I would absolutely support this and really hope and pray for this. The other thing is it will put even more work than there already is on the shoulders of those who call themselves pro-life. Because there should be more people being born every year in our country, and there are already a lot of people who need care and love. So more work for all of us to do, but I hope you're right about this. This is one. Well,
so the case in question is Dobbs v. Jackson Health Care Center, I believe is the actual case, but Dobbs v. Jackson.
Yep.
And the oral arguments were made on December 1st of this year. And, we made a little documentary about it, a web doc. You can find it on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
But Amy Coney Barrett was questioning Julie Rickleman, who's the attorney representing Jackson Women's Health. And she alluded, and I've always thought it's Amy Coney Barrett's dream to overturn Roe v. Wade. And Roe v. Wade is bad precedent. It's bad law in and of itself. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but
Go ahead. I was going to say, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said this, Justice RBG, in an interview, she very openly said, like, the Supreme Court went ahead and basically ruled in a way that, I don't remember how she phrased it. It wasn't yet the rule of law, like it wasn't in our country yet. She used the right terms, obviously. And so even she was saying, like, this really was pretty unprecedented that the Supreme Court ruled that way. Anyways, we should find the actual clip and play it.
Yeah, it has to do with the Constitution. So they tried to make the argument in the oral arguments most recently, but there is no right to abortion explicitly in the Constitution. Like there is the right to bear arms or the freedom of speech explicitly written out in the text. So the 14th Amendment, which is the Equal Protection Clause, was used to justify why a woman has the right to abortion. So the equal opportunity would be equal opportunity to be able to pursue a career free from motherhood.
Yep.
And then also, I think, bodily autonomy. I think those are the two strains, as Julie Rickleman said. So I think it's going to be overturned. They'll do it in June, and because Amy, I think, is set on doing that. And I think the compromise is going to be, though, is Amy Coney Barrett is going to rule in favor of Biden and the OSHA mandate. Because she alluded to it. Well, it's the autonomy. She said in her argument, or when she was remarking to the Jackson attorney, what did she say again? She
basically was saying that, saying that a woman cannot have her child aborted, her unborn child, is an infringement on that woman's bodily autonomy. That is true, but there is not an overarching right to bodily autonomy above everything else. And what Amy Coney Barrett said is we have another example of that, for example, with vaccines. I would say clearly bodily autonomy does not trump everything else. You can't kill or rape someone, but the example she gave was vaccines. And so Tony thinks that means that she'll say bodily autonomy does not take precedence when it comes to vaccines. So very interesting decision for everyone to make. Those who think that women do have a right to have their own child aborted because of the woman's bodily autonomy, for that same person to then say, yep, that's true. You can choose to have the life of your unborn child ended, but you can't choose whether or not to have something injected into you, even when the thing injected into you doesn't prevent transmission to someone else. That's a very strange argument. And I'm not trying to be dismissive, but
That's why
it's something to think on.
It's going to come down to the science and the circuit court that reinstated the OSHA rule.
Yeah.
Was it the Sixth Circuit?
I don't remember.
So they used science as their basis, and
Yeah.
OSHA used science for the basis of
Yeah.
their argument as well. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because the science is a little iffy on
And
all that.
again, if we really are using science, if this ruling is going to stand, why is OSHA only having those unpoked be tested, but not those who are poked be tested when we have so many examples of people transmitting the virus? Sorry, I keep saying it. I just
Because
can't
it's
understand
because Fauci is science.
I forgot.
Remember
I
that
forgot.
Yeah, Fauci science.
Silly me.
You stand against science, you stand against Fauci. They're one of the same, essentially. So
All right.
here's the other prediction I have. Go ahead.
Australia will reemerge as ground zero for the most draconian lockdowns. So like I said, the one time that Tony read these predictions to me, my response was, aren't they still? But he said he explained it well.
They're more free now than they were a few months ago. People are able to roam around. I don't even know if they have the mask mandates anymore. They did the coerced pokes pretty much to almost everybody. You can't work there and make money unless you got poked.
Okay.
There are people who did not, but they're at home. They can't work. They can't go to a lot of places. So they earned their freedom back there. But
They
I think
earned back their God-given freedom.
But for them, and I think this is why it's going to lead to a disastrous outcome in a way for many in Australia. They're going to be really upset. Not everybody. Like a lot of people in Australia, they're totally fine with everything that the government's done there. Not everybody, but the majority are.
Do you know for sure it's the majority?
Yes, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do what they did. They locked down for over 500 days in some areas. So, but it's going to follow the same trajectory, right? It's the same trick in a way. Like they have reverse seasons in Australia. So right now it's summer.
Mild.
It's summer. It's even more than mild. It's hot.
Right.
And
I guess I meant the cases are mild.
oh, right.
The
Yeah.
virus.
So in their winter time was. They just got over
Right.
their winter. So regardless, their cases are going like this, but then everybody got the dose. Now they got their freedom. Their cases are going to remain low until their flu season comes again. And when it does,
They'll be locked down again.
and there's going to be, and their doses aren't going to be, according to, what Fauci and others are saying, it's not going to be resistant to some of the strains, Omicron or whatever. So their cases are going to spike there.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to shut down again, and that's ground zero. That's what I say. They had the most draconian shutdown, except for maybe areas of China, which is right on their doorstep. So I think that's where they're heading. I hope I'm wrong for my friends
I do too.
in Australia. But next one.
I hope you're wrong for the whole world too. Yes, for
I hope I'm wrong in
Australians,
almost
but
all these
for-
predictions.
Okay, next prediction. Massive protests in major cities worldwide will continue and grow in intensity. I hope you're right about this. Although by intensity, I hope you don't mean like violence, but I absolutely hope that protests worldwide will continue and grow. I recently saw some about Chicago, or some protests happening in Chicago. It's so encouraging for me to see. And I truly wonder, we've talked in previous shows about really very different streams of information that people are receiving. I really do wonder if some people know how many protests there are in Ireland, Italy, the UK, even Australia. At least some protests in Australia have had very, very large turnout. Thus far, I think that they've all been peaceful. Minnesota has had a few. New York has had quite a few. So I definitely hope it continues. I really, really, really I want unity on this. You can be very, very pro vaccine for yourself, for your children, and you can still be against other people being forced to have something injected that's not preventing transmission, and you can be against people being literally kept out of society because of their medical decision.
Yeah, I'm not as optimistic as you. I don't want to have protests. I don't feel like we need, yes, we want to protest when our rights are being trampled on, when people are being coerced into do things that they don't want, when medical privacy and freedom is being violated, like we absolutely need to protest. And the more people that do so peacefully, the better. I wish we didn't have to.
Oh,
I wish we didn't
absolutely.
have to.
Yeah.
But they're going to intensify
Yeah.
because it'll be a direct result of the opposite coming down on them even harder. And you're seeing it in Europe. You're seeing it in Germany. You're seeing it in Poland, not Poland, but was it Romania?
I don't know. I don't know the other one.
I can't remember either, but they're cracking down. You see it in New York City. You
I was
see it
gonna
in
say
Chicago.
DC and
You know,
Chicago,
they're
yeah.
arresting
California.
veterans for going in, and so people are pushing back. But I think the more that people push back, the more that whip's going to crack. And I think that there's more things coming down the pipeline that's going to create a lot of chaos. And people are going to be coerced into doing even more things that they don't want to as the agenda moves forward.
This is why I am very convinced that we need to stand up for human rights. Always. We need to stand up for bodily autonomy. Always. It doesn't mean that there should never be any public health measures or encouragement or anything like that, but we need to stand up for these things always, because if we don't, it does get to the point where really the only way to stand up is like risking your life. And I don't mean like joining or starting a violent protest, but getting to the point where perhaps the government is so harsh that you lose the ability to protest in a peaceful way and you are putting yourself at risk. But I hope that we still have the courage to do so for one another.
Protests have never meant so much to me as they have this last year. You know, I've always looked at protests in a way of like, okay, yeah, they're important. Freedom of speech is important, but that actual right has been magnified and made, in my mind anyway, more important than ever. Like seeing people around the world standing up, holding signs, gathering in masses, speaking out peacefully, it does a lot to,
Absolutely.
you know, especially when you can't use other forums and media to say whatever you want, when people are being censored and blackballed and you have that uniform narrative.
And there is something encouraging, or more than encouraging, there's something emboldening about personally being at a peaceful protest with many, many people, and then the next day or even later that day seeing the report saying like approximately 100 people were there and it was so many more than 100, and you're like, that's not true. But in some ways it's almost encouraging, like so strange that you're reporting on this so incorrectly, but I suppose great that you're trying to downplay this. But I was there and I know how many people were there, and
That's why
I don't
getting
know.
those shots above where you can really get a good perspective, like those are very powerful images, because it's
absolutely.
hard to counter what you see.
Yeah, it is.
You know,
It
if
is.
you don't have those shots and you're like, oh yeah, a few hundred, that's
Right,
nobody. You know,
right.
there's nobody that believes that. So,
Totally.
next
Totally.
one.
Next prediction. More people will begin to accept microchip implantation to track vax status, and other technologies will be introduced. So I have a lot of friends who I still love dearly who said a lot of things early on in the pandemic about how anyone talking about microchips was a conspiracy theorist and crazy. So here's, if you're just listening to this, Tony just put up a picture. It's a dime next to a microchip. It says a microchip the size of a grain of rice can be implanted under your skin to help provide your poke status. According to a South China Morning Post tweet, the chip is implanted into your arm and can verify your poke status when placed next to an NFC, which I
That's the
assume is some
technology.
kind of reader, right? This is from Idaho News. Implanted microchip could be used to verify COVID-19 poke status, and it shows a picture. It does definitely look like the size of a grain of rice. So it's really interesting. I mean, I remember people saying this about the microchips from the potential COVID poke. This was before we had it. Here's from Tech Times. COVID-19 microchip implant can now verify your vaccination status. But what else? What else can it do? So if someone actually thought that the poke itself was going to put a microchip under your skin, you perhaps had never in your life received a vaccine or seeing how small that needle is. So I get that. Like, that sounds pretty insane to say, like, it's going to be secretly implanted into you. And then all the people who made jokes about it, like, got my dose and now I, hope I can pick up Wi-Fi, or good, now my kids can be tracked, or
Make it
joking.
on me.
Yeah, things like that. I mean, I get it. Like, if they're just making a joke, fine, you can make a joke. But what's really sad to me is it was pretty obvious that this was moving towards some type of passport that would prevent people from participating in society, a passport that would segregate people. And I think, at least everyone I personally talked to, that's what they were concerned about. It's not the literal physical chip. Whether it's a chip in your body that can be read and that can keep you out of a restaurant or keep your kid out of school, or whether it's a card that you must show in order to enter a restaurant or a movie theater, in order for your child to enter school, whatever it is, the appalling thing is something that requires you to show your personal medical history, and then that they use to segregate you or segregate others. In the same way, I saw other people say, like, that's so insane. If you have a smartphone, they're already tracking everything you do. Totally agree. However, my smartphone intentionally does not have any of my personal medical history. I can't even log into my medical chart on there intentionally. And so it's just like, were these people saying these things purposely trying to make people think this isn't an issue, or were they really not understanding that, like, people's concern isn't just a chip in and of itself? People's concern is segregation based on personal medical choices, being controlled by people in power, and yeah, that's the main thing. So I mean, what people currently know on our smartphone is different in your personal medical history, and I have never seen someone discriminated against based on the music or they listen to, or what they buy at Target with their smartphone. So I don't know. I can't help but wonder, like, did these people really not understand what the concern is, or were they trying to make people ignore the real concern? I don't know.
One of the worst parts about the article that I saw on there was at the very last line, the guy was like, "Oh yeah, I'm old enough to remember when this used to be the craziest conspiracy theory ever," and he's like, "Well, now it's here."
Yeah,
like, just totally dismissing it.
Yeah, totally.
Dismissing like what the whole thing was.
Right.
So in part of this prediction, it's not only the chip, but there's going to be other technologies associated with it, not just tracking. It's going to be linked to finances. I don't know if this is going to be rolled out this year, but I think in Sweden they're already doing this. It just came out, so people are already doing this. They're talking about using it first and foremost to track your status for the poke, so you can get into restaurants, bars, gyms, schools, wherever. But the technology is going to be already there, and it's going to be developed further so that you're going to need it to go to the grocery store to buy something, or to do any type of a transaction or purchase, which we all know where the root of that, I don't even want to call it conspiracy theory, it's just a theory of where humanity has been heading this whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's well said. I don't think I have anything else to add.
So we've had 9 so far now, 9 pretty doom and gloom predictions in a way.
Any other good one?
There's one more we have left, but I just
Okay.
wanted to add, I think 2022 is going to be a difficult year. It's not going to be an apocalyptic year. We're all going to have food. We're all going to be able to have shelter. Those of us, who have it already, I guess, there definitely are homeless people and people who are suffering, people who don't have food. But I just mean, like, I don't think there's going to be a supply crisis. I don't think the stock market's going to have this enormous crash. I don't think Armageddon's coming in 2022. I just want to make that clear. I just think it's going to be a very difficult year. We're not going back to normal anytime soon. Normal is still a thing of the past in a way. And I'm not even quite sure what normal means anymore. And I don't even know if how we were living in 2019 or 2016 or 2010, I don't even think that was normal either. So, but 2022, it'll be much like 2020, 2021, except more intense. It's going to be more intense, and there's more on the line, and there's going to be more people who whose eyes are opened, who are starting to understand what's going on. And there's going to be more people who are going to try to peacefully resist, but at the same time, the whip is going to crack because there's gold on the table, and they want the pot. They want the ante. They want the final hurrah, the solution. And they haven't achieved that yet. And again, who's they, that's a different show. We're not going to discuss who they is right now. Last one.
So,
to
10th
end
prediction.
on a good note.
Dun, dun,
So
dun.
what's going to happen in 2022 that's hopeful, or Leona?
Let's see. More people will turn to Christ and accept Jesus in their hearts. I do want to say that we absolutely can and always can end on the most positive and hopeful note, not just because Christmas is almost here, but there is one reason why we always have reason to hope and not worry and even not get worked up like I do. And it is Christ. So that's truth, I believe, with every fiber of my being. But I like this prediction that even more people will turn to Christ and accept Jesus in their hearts.
They're going to be the people that realize what's going on in a way, who are frightened and they need to seek answers. And these people who I'm talking about aren't going to be the religious. They're not going to be people who have been lifelong devoted Christians. They are going to be people who were aware of Jesus, but they're going to be all of a sudden turning to Jesus for the first time because of what we're living through. But the vast majority of people are not. They're going to head in the other direction.
So it's still a depressing prediction. No.
It is, but it
I mean,
isn't. So that's why, I mean, if you have Jesus in your hearts, like, this is the time to like reach out to people, to teach people, to let them know that they're loved, that Jesus loves them, and that there's
That they're welcome.
there's life after this world, that there's eternal life as a promise to escape damnation.
And that all of these battles really have been won. I don't know if these specific battles will be won in our lifetime. We can try because we care about one another. And I think we're called to care for our brothers and sisters currently on earth, and help to alleviate suffering and help to fight evil. But we don't know if these specific battles will be won. So I mean, we can't guarantee, obviously, that we can hope in that, but we ultimately have hope that all of the battles have been won.
Yeah. Jesus didn't die on the cross, at least in my belief, for us to all live cushy lives,
It's true.
working a cushy job, having all the comforts and materials of life. I'm not saying those things are necessarily evil, but I think that what we want to focus on is the afterlife. And it comes down to a simple choice. When the choice is presented in front of you, do you choose the darkness or do you choose the light? Choose Jesus, or you choose, what's the opposite? It's not, I mean, it is evil, but there's also the choice that we have on earth. So what is that choice that we're faced with on earth? That's the most difficult one that you need to make. So it's like the comforts or everything that you love in life, or Jesus. And I think more people are going to realize that in the midst of oppression and tyranny and hopelessness, they're going to find that light there.
Yeah. And to be clear, I at least don't think like, oh, the choice is Jesus or the Pope. Like, that's not
No,
what
that's
we're
not what we're
saying. You certainly can choose to get that. I think if you are getting it only because you're coerced by an employer and you absolutely otherwise don't want it, that's a problem.
It could be, though, it could be Jesus or the chip. So,
Maybe we'll see. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh man, do you think they're going to start mandating something like that?
that's the prophecy. That's the prophecy. But I don't think that's anytime
Soon.
near.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Crazy.
in the meantime, pray, love your kids, love your loved ones, grab everyone close, find people who are like-minded, that believe in the same things that you do. And yeah, it's a good time to hunker down, though. 2022 will be a great time to develop and grow your spirituality, your faith. And really
And I do
dig
think
into
we
that.
can still have joy and bring joy to others. I I think that's such a gift.
Yes.
And we can ultimately have joy.
Yes.
Merry Christmas. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good night.